Hi, in this video we're going to do a little bit of a review with fractions, specifically how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide with fractions. Adding and subtracting are really going to follow the same rules. Let's start with a very, very important rule. And that is that to add and subtract fractions, they must have a common denominator, the denominator being that bottom number of the fraction. So if we were to add 2/3 and 7/3, we would be allowed to do that because they both have 3 in the denominator. They have a common denominator. And when they do have a common denominator, you can just keep that denominator in your answer and then either add or subtract, if it's a subtraction problem, the numerators. So in this case, 2 and 7 add up to 9. We keep that denominator of 3. And then if we need to simplify that fraction further, so in this case 9 divided by 3 does simplify to 3, you can do that. So the steps to adding and subtracting fractions, that most important step is to make sure you have a common denominator. And if you don't, get one. I'm going to go through an example of how to do that. Then to actually do the adding or subtracting, you're going to keep that denominator, and then you're going to either add or subtract those numerators. So here's an example. If they don't have a common denominator, we're going to make one. So 3/4 minus 3/8. Right? The 4 and the 8 in the denominators, they do not match. This is not a common denominator. So how do we make them into the same denominator? Well, it's going to involve some multiplying. I'm going to make some space here. We're allowed to take those fractions and multiply them by 1, because multiplying by 1 doesn't really change the value of things. It's just that we get to choose what that 1 looks like. So in this case, I could take the 4 and turn it into an 8. And the way that I could do that is to multiply it by 2. Well, I can't just multiply the bottom by 2, right? Remember, I said that I'm allowed to multiply a value by 1 because it's not going to change its value. So instead of writing just a 1, I'm going to write 1 as 2/2, right? That's the same thing as a 1. And now if I multiply those two fractions together, and we're going to go into more detail about how you actually multiply, we get 6/8, and now we have the subtraction problem, right, with the minus 3/8. We're back to having that common denominator. So the steps say to find that common denominator, keep the denominator, so we'd have an 8 in the bottom there, and then I subtracted the numerators to get 3/8. And 3/8 doesn't simplify, so that problem would be done. So let's move on to multiplying. I find multiplying to be easier because I don't need to have a common denominator. So this first example, 3/5 times 8/9, I don't care that the 5 and the 9 don't match. So to multiply them, I'm going to simplify it first. I find that easier. I could simplify at the end, but why would I multiply bigger numbers if I don't have to? So simplifying, I see any of these numbers that have common factors. So 3 and 9, they both have a common factor of 3. So let's simplify the 3 and the 9 here. So 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 goes into 9 3 times. So already look at that. Those numbers have turned into lower numbers. We're left with 1, 5, 8, and 3. No common factors left over there. Now it's time to simply multiply the tops together and multiply the bottoms together. So 1 times 8 gets us 8, and 5 times 3 gets us 15. And that problem would be done, right? We just multiplied straight across in this direction. We go this way, boom, this way. A lot of people think of, oh, do I cross multiply? No, you're thinking of something else, and you have to get these straight. We're multiplying fractions, we go straight across. So here are those steps again. We like to simplify those common factors first, then we multiply the numerators together, and then we multiply the denominators. Let's try one more example. We can multiply as many fractions as we want. It means we can simplify as many fractions as we want as well. So lots of numbers here with common factors. Let's start this off with the 10 and the 5 having a common factor of 5. So 5 goes into 10 twice, 5 goes into 5 once. Let's see, what else could we simplify? We have a 6 and a 9, right? They have a common factor of 3. So 3 goes into 6 twice, and it goes into 9 3 times. There's a little bit more simplifying we could do, right? We have an 8, and we have some 2's up there, and they have common factor of 2. So let's cross out that 8 and one of the 2's, doesn't really matter which one. And 2 goes into 2 once, and it goes into 8 4 times. Now there's still some more simplifying that we could do here. I'm just going to go ahead to show you what happens if you either forget to do it or don't recognize to do it, or just choose to do it at the end. All right, so let's move on to the multiplying here. Multiply the numerators. So we're multiplying 2, 7, 1. Multiply the denominators, 3, 4, and 1. So on the top we get a 14, and on the bottom we get a 12. Hopefully that stands out to you as being something that can be simplified because they are both even numbers. So you could just save your simplifying for the end here. 2 goes into both those numbers, so we wind up with 7 over 6. We could have done more simplifying back here though with this 2 and this 4 if we chose to. All right, so we got one more thing to cover, and that's dividing. Good news is dividing really is just a multiplying problem with a little tweak to it. So you don't actually do dividing, which is kind of weird. So let's have an example here, 2 fractions being divided. 6/15 divided by 3/10. Like I said, that's going to change into a multiplying problem. Here are our steps. Keep the first fraction, change the division to a multiplication symbol. Flip the second fraction, and now do the multiplying. A lot of people have just memorized this as keep, change, flip. So we're going to keep that 6/15, change the division to multiplication, and flip the 3/10 into a 10/3. So we just did steps 1 through 3 there. Now we're back to the previous slide. What have we learned? To multiply, it's good to simplify things first. So I'm going to simplify the 6 and the 3, right? They have a common factor of 3. So that goes in twice there, once there. And then the 10 and the 15 have a common factor of 5. So we can do some simplifying there, right? 5 goes into 15 3 times and into 10 twice. I don't think we have anything left to simplify. So it's time to multiply across, right? See, we didn't do any dividing, right? We're just doing some multiplying. So on the top, we get 4. And on the bottom, we get 3. 4/3 can't be simplified any further. And that example would be done. Now, here's the thing. This is your Algebra 1 class. As you progress through math, you're going to notice that that division symbol doesn't show up as often as another symbol does. So this is a fraction made up of fractions. And it really is the same thing as just having a big division problem. This is saying 4/9. Here's your division symbol, it's just a bar now, divided by 14/3. The same rules are going to apply here. We're going to keep this, change this to multiplying, flip this fraction around. Here we go. Keep 4/9, change to multiply, and that's called the reciprocal when we flip that over, so 3/14. A little bit of simplifying we could do, right? 4 and 14 have a common factor of 2. 3 and 9 have a common factor of 3. And now we're going to multiply across, so we get 2 over 21. And that is that. So really, adding and subtracting use the same rules. I'd say dividing and multiplying kind of fall into the same category, except the dividing has that extra little change and flip action going. But yeah, if you could just memorize that adding and subtracting need a common denominator. Multiplying and dividing don't. That's going to be the biggest help to you. All right, good luck with fractions.